Good morning, everyone. I'm hoping that you can hear me loud and clear wherever you're joining the SafetyOn virtual stakeholder day from. This is quite different to how we held our first stakeholder day just some 12 months ago in Edinburgh. And the concept or the idea of being in a room with 100, 150 of you again does seem still to be some way off. I'll introduce myself. I'm Lindsay Mcquade. I'm the current chair of SafetyOn, and I'm delighted to be with you this morning as we pitch our second stakeholder day to you. I would have dearly loved it to be physically in a room with you, but that's not going to be possible this year for very obvious reasons. But I think it is fantastic that we are all able to convene in this virtual world that we've all become terribly familiar with over the period. And I would say that COVID-19 has been one of the things that SafetyOn's had to respond to in a pretty agile fashion during 2020. It's not necessarily been something that we planned or could even have conceivably thought we would be in this position this time last year. But the one thing I have been delighted about is the response from the members of SafetyOn, the engagement that we've seen all the way across the sector, and then the feedback I've also had, even from beyond the membership, about the safety standards that have been put in place to support our industry, irrespective of whether they're developing assets, constructing assets, operating assets, or indeed back in the office supporting all of those processes. And that's been something that the team have worked very diligently to ensure that we are keeping a pace with the latest regulations and guidance. And I understand that we're in the process of pushing out at some point very soon version 10 of that guidance, which just shows you how much we've had to learn and respond to over that period. And I was particularly delighted for the industry, and I hope you all are too, for the recognition of that work at the Scottish Renewables Green Energy Awards last week, where we received the award for positive improvement. So excellent recognition for the work that's been done, and a big thank you to the organisation and specific members of SafetyOn and Renewable UK for their participation, involvement and support in that process. So it hasn't really been a normal year, but I think today what we're wanting to talk about mostly is everything else that's been going on. So we'll touch on absolutely the work that's been happening as part of COVID-19 and what the ramifications of that have been for health and safety across the onshore wind sector. But I'm also keen that we can present to you and articulate to you what else has been happening, because business as usual has absolutely been part of that work that's been ongoing. So the key themes of today are going to be about the work programme that we had mooted at the last stakeholder event, and demonstrate the sort of progress we've made against there, whether that's working at heights, whether that's to do with emergency response, and the publications that have come out to support those work streams. We'll also then take you through the latest set of data that we've managed to collate from across the sector, building that bank of knowledge, that bank of information that will then obviously go on to inform in a more proactive way the work plans in future periods as well. And having that data is going to be completely relevant and important as we do look for risk indicators or any trend analysis going forward with SafetyOn. We'll then have the pleasure of also having a dedicated session today with regard to our Tier 2 membership. So that's probably been one of the biggest changes since this time last year. We have grown our Tier 2 membership quite significantly, and I'm delighted that Ricky Guy is going to be here to present and talk about that Tier 2 progress that's been made over the course of the year. We're then going to talk about the work plan for 2021 so that you've got a heads up and an understanding of what the initial work plan is looking like. Obviously, there's still an opportunity to influence and inform that work plan and also to participate in any of the work streams that are coming forward. And then we're also very, very delighted to be welcoming Dr. Fiona Errol from Hull University to speak with us about human factors and what does that mean. And that's really a follow-on from the excellent session that we had at last year's stakeholder day with regard to mental health, which really seemed to resonate with everybody that was there. So we're hoping that this furtherance of the discussion around human factors and basically how do we as individuals affect health and safety outcomes? What does our behaviour mean? How does our thought process affect? What's the culture of an organisation mean? And go into those elements in a bit more detail. So I'm delighted that Fiona will be joining us this morning with Ewan McMillan from Scottish Power as well. And then finally, a good old wash up at the end of the day where you'll have the opportunity to quiz a number of contacts from around the sector. Delighted that Trevor Johnson's been able to join us from HSC again this year, and Trevor will be joined by a mix of Tier 2, Tier 1 members, and Hugh McNeill from Renewables UK as well. So please do use the facility on the WebEx to ask any questions that you might have, and I'm very much looking forward to all of the sessions today, just so that you get an idea of the work that has been going on and the position that SafetyOn now has in the renewable sector and onshore wind sector. So I mentioned, if I can move on to the next slide, please, Beata. Thank you. So we talked about our membership, and a lot of these names will be familiar to you from the slide that I put up this time last year, but we've been particularly pleased to welcome Deutsche Windtechnik as another Tier 1 member over the course of 2020. And if I go to the next slide again, that will show you their logo now on our screen as well. So these are the members that sit on the leadership board, and it's great to have everybody there representing their organisations, representing the onshore wind sector. And again, I've been very pleased with the engagement that we've received from the group, the collaboration and cooperation of that group, as well as we've sought to further work with regard to health and safety challenges that we are facing in our sector. And those challenges are going to continue to come as we move in the context of net zero and the green industrial revolution, or the green recovery that's been much talked about just now. Taller turbines, repowering, co-location of assets, and all of these things are items that we're going to have to think about when we go forward as well. So please do have a think about questions that you might have, and you'll be able to quiz folk later on in the day. So that's the Tier 1 membership. If I can move on to the next slide, it's this group that I'm particularly delighted to see joining us today, and I really do hope that a range of you have been able to join the event. Having the greater diversity, having this contribution from all of you is going to make a difference to the work programme and the outcomes of SafetyOn. You'll also be our advocates as well as the Tier 1 members in terms of making sure that SafetyOn continues to deliver what it needs to do in terms of delivering mitigations, identifying risks, providing relatively consistent guidance across the sector as well, so that we can all ensure that we are coming to work and hopefully getting home from work safely each and every day. I think I want to take a second to reflect on the events of yesterday, particularly harrowing news coming out of the Bristol area, Avonmouth, with a Wessex Water site experiencing an explosion, and very sad news that 4 individuals have lost their lives, and people are still in hospital quite gravely injured. Obviously investigations are ongoing there, but when you start to see things like that talking in the news on a reasonably frequent basis, it does make you worry, it does make you reflect. You think about your own sector, you think about the risks that you take every day, you think about the mitigations that you've got in place, and very much we need to keep all of that front of mind and carry that health and safety culture with us wherever we're going and whatever part of the value chain we sit in within the onshore wind sector. So if I could move on to the next slide, please, Beata. Thank you. So for those that are perhaps joining who haven't joined the first SafetyOn Stakeholder Day last year, or perhaps less familiar with our operation and have dipped in to understand a bit more about what we do, SafetyOn is still a relatively young organisation. We're about 18 months old, 2 years old. And it was really driven through discussions that took place a few years ago at Bootle, that there was a need to demonstrate leadership in health and safety across the onshore wind sector and really be seen to be tackling some of the issues that we were all facing, and also to be on front of foot when we considered what issues there might be coming towards us as we started to do more work on the energy transition and what role onshore wind would have in that. So for us, the bullet points on this slide are very, very core to our being. It is about that consistency, it is about that access to data, it is about that collaboration. And I would say that the collaborative side of SafetyOn has certainly been something that I've been delighted to see. And again, thank you to everybody for their continued commitment to the various work plans and packages that we've got going on. They have been utterly necessary, and they are keeping people safe at work, and we just need to keep on with that commitment and doing more of the same. It is likely that we are going to see new entrants coming into this market. It is likely that we're going to see thousands of jobs created in this market as well as the net zero task and challenge faces us. And with each new entrant and with each new job created, we need to ensure that the health and safety culture pervades those new members, and that they also are bringing that right mindset when they come to work as well. If I can move on to the next slide again, Beata. Thank you. So I think the thing for me is that, you know, this is not a talking shop as well. So I guess this is a wee bit more about the culture of SafetyOn. It's not a talking shop, and please do feel free, if you are sitting as a non-member and listening to me, feel free to speak to me, feel free to speak to any members of the leadership board or indeed the technical committee that supports the work of SafetyOn about the culture of SafetyOn. To my mind, it's all about transparency, it's about openness, it is about collaboration, as I've talked about, but it's also about being outcomes focused. We know what we want to get to, we know that we want to mitigate those risks as effectively as possible, and that we also want to ensure that no one's left behind in that, so that the engagement that we have with Renewable UK is critical in reaching that wider part of the sector that maybe can't afford or have some challenges in becoming a member of SafetyOn in their own right. But I also want to see SafetyOn growing as a body, so that we can ensure we are representing all aspects of the onshore wind sector at this point of what is going to be a big growth challenge. So having all of those work streams kicking off into 2021, concluding those from 2020, and adding to those that might emerge as new issues, and also scrutinising the data that we have, is going to be critical work that the Technical Advisory Committee will be undertaking, and then the various work streams and work groups come out from that as well. So if there is anything that you've got particular interest or I have a question about with regard to the work packages, please do raise that today as well, and we can take that away and reflect upon it as well. As we've touched on, we have got a fairly diverse group. So I'm sitting here from Scottish Power Renewables. I'm the Chief Exec there. We are obviously an owner-operator. We have a model where we engage with OEMs, we engage with ISPs, we engage with key elements in our supply chain, and obviously we're busy constructing a number of assets, as are others in the sector as well. But those assets aren't just wind, and we are co-locating other technologies on our wind farms, and through that process we've had to think about what does that mean for our risk, what does that mean for any mitigation that we require to put in place, and again I'd imagine that others are in a similar boat as well. So I think these are some of the key topics that we'll be touching on throughout the course of today. But what I wanted to do was kick the morning off with a short film that's been produced to reflect on 2020 and the year that has been for SafetyOn. After we've played that film, David Armour, the chair of the Technical Advisory Committee, will then follow on with his presentation about the work that's been taking place this year. Thank you and good morning.
SafetyOn is the health and safety organisation for UK onshore wind. We provide health and safety leadership by creating a platform for industry participation and sharing and embedding knowledge and good practice. We are a collective of expert companies and organisations, and our strength comes from this broad range of committed stakeholders. We encourage all organisations that play a role in UK onshore wind to participate. Together, we are driven to continually improve working environments. We are never complacent, and we always strive for better. We began this year full of optimism about the growing commitment to net zero targets and the part our industry can play. But 2020 had other things in store. Across the UK, onshore wind has been subject to stringent new requirements and uncertainty. But we didn't dial down our work. We did more. We worked with industry, developed new guidance and information, and helped our members make the operational changes to make sure sites across the UK were COVID safe, and demonstrated that health and safety would not be compromised. And we've continued to make progress on our original work plans. Our ambition for 2021 is even greater. We will continue to support the sector as it adjusts to the evolving COVID-19 context. And we will drive to even better health and safety performance with a programme of work that is firmly targeted to the areas where we can make the greatest impact. We'll be looking at a broader sector engagement, data collection, and our first annual report, and new work streams on confined spaces, human factors, on-site traffic management, turbine decommissioning, and electrical safety. We're looking forward to building on the sector's achievements and providing the ongoing leadership to improve health and safety performance. And we need you to be part of it.
My name's David Armour. I'm the chair of the Technical Advisory Committee, and I am going to give you a few minutes on what we've done this year, basically what we've covered in 2020. So, sorry, Beata, if you can just progress the slide. So, as we kind of touched on at the beginning there, we can't really kick this off without mentioning COVID. Okay, while we did know that COVID was coming, we maybe didn't appreciate that the extent it would have, hitting all industries. So, Beata, if we can just progress all the points there. So, we were concerned that, looking at other industries and the way other industries were being stopped and restrictions that were being put in place, we believed that due to, by its very nature, our industry, it's remote, our sites in the middle of nowhere essentially, they're spread out, we generally have low numbers of workers available on our sites. So we decided to kind of develop guidance to apply a consistent approach across all of our members. The guidance itself, the intent of the guidance was specifically high-level principles. What we didn't want is to try and write a compliance manual and instruction booklet for COVID. Simply put, at the time, it just wasn't possible. Everything was changing kind of on a daily basis. Okay. The other function of the guidance is obviously to direct the user to applicable UK guidance, information from the WHO, and obviously kind of relevant information from the NHS. So the team that delivered, the team that was working on that, it was a good team. Kind of, we still meet every week to discuss any changes within the industry and how we will kind of factor them into the next revisions of the document. At the moment, as Lindsay said, we're on version 9 and we will be looking to get version 10 out in the next couple of weeks. We originally began with O&M activities, but very quickly realised that we could continue with the construction of activities that were taking place within the industry. Kind of as we progressed, we then started to look at returning to the office. This was obviously before the second spike, but obviously the second spike occurred and that kind of slowed down a wee bit. The most recent version that we have put together, version 9, we've kind of started to work. We've considered mental health and employee well-being, and obviously version 10 will look to maybe progress that a wee bit more. Okay, and again, the other kind of positive of the guidance as well is we've involved not just the group, but also members of the HSE, involved RUK, spoken to the trade unions, and now on the ScotGov website for COVID, it directs the user to our document as the kind of guidance document to follow. Okay, Beata, can you progress to the next one, please? So yeah, looking at the other things that we've done this year, some of the kind of bigger tickets that we've done, good practice guidelines. So this is the working under suspended loads. We held a workshop at the tail end of 2019 where we decided, we got multiple stakeholders from the lifting industry into the one room, got lots of points of view, number of discussion points. It was facilitated by our Catapult. They've done a really good job. They took all that information, put it into a pot, and came out with this kind of guidance document. The report includes a bow tie analysis that details the preventative controls and recovery mitigation for working under suspended loads, and basically kind of considerations, training considerations, and also concerns and risks that are that we kind of encounter within the industry and how we try and kind of mitigate those. Okay, Beata, can you go to the next one? Okay, the next kind of thing, September 2020, we released a guidance document for onshore wind energy emergency response. So this was a continuation of a project that was originally begun with Renewable UK. Through their ORE group, we sat with a team that included developers, turbine suppliers, service providers, and again, we all sat around the table, brought our points of view to the topic, or on that topic, and we started to further develop this document. Again, it sets out an approach by all duty holders. It doesn't kind of define what a duty holder is. Essentially, the way we look at it is if you're in charge of a piece of work or in charge of staff, you're a duty holder. And, it basically guides the user on considerations, training, kind of likely events that can happen on site that might require emergency response and what that emergency response looks like. The other kind of useful aspect of the document is it does include kind of templates and documents that is an example of, the kind of things that you might need to complete to demonstrate that you have got an effective emergency response plan in place. The other kind of positive thing as well is we've worked with the HSE on this document, and we've tried to align it with the forthcoming information coming out on emergency response for the onshore industry as well. So hopefully they will be aligned and they'll reflect each other. Thanks very much. Beata, can we move on? I'm assuming Beata's driving this, sorry if it's not. Okay. The next piece of work that we did was it was a investigation piece into turbine fires. Originally it was based on a letter that was sent out by the regulator to the industry, 2 letters actually, highlighting concerns with fires and actually asking a question, is it safe to have a switchgear and transformers externally or internally placed within a turbine? Worth kind of noting that David Goodfellow from Nordex really delivered this project. This is a lot of his work's going into this, a lot of his time and effort has gone into this. So thanks for that. And we worked with the HSE, who very gratefully gave us access to the RIDDOR and ESQCR data pertaining to turbine fires. They were analysed, and we kind of drew some kind of points out of that. The aim of it was to basically present a balanced view of the risks and mitigation related to switchgear, and we did come out with a few kind of findings there. David did. The first one potentially being that the fires over the last 5 years have started to have been coming down. These kind of incidents within turbines have started to tail off in the last 5 years. But it also highlights that there's a risk. There's maybe a greater risk to our technicians on LV switching operations and these kind of activities and kind of arc flash and all that kind of thing. So we'll touch on that further into the day when we're looking at 2021 workstream. Thanks very much, Beata, on you go. So the other thing that we've managed to kind of achieve this year as well is we're kind of the point of contact for the industry as well. Pre-SafetyOn, one of the concerns that we had, or one of the issues I felt, was that each stakeholder within the industry knew something, but no one knew everything, kind of thing. And it was, have you heard about this? No, I haven't. All these kind of situations arise. So now we are kind of regarded, if there's any formal communication coming out from the HSE, it usually goes to Lindsay, the chair of the TAC, and we use that then to communicate it out throughout the rest of the leadership board and the technical advisory committee. The example we've got on the table, I've got on the screen there, is a letter was sent to us in 2020 highlighting a potential stall in our health and safety performance. We then sought a meeting with the HSE to discuss the contents, got a bit more clarity around it, and we were able to communicate that to the leadership board and to the TAC. We then kind of agreed a kind of response, but however, rather than 40 individual responses going to the regulator, we decided on one kind of official response from SafetyOn detailing the kind of activities that we were going to do to address their concerns, which was received. Thanks very much, Beata, on you go. So the other thing that we've achieved this year as well is better communication. The SafetyOn website now has a number of areas where you can go and get updates. Obviously, you can get kind of notifications when things have been added to the website now. And just across the screen now, you can see examples of some of the things that we're looking at. So, for example, winter conditions is getting, looking out my window at the moment, you can see it's a bit of snowfall in the last couple of days, but low temperatures. So again, we're just kind of steering users to things they might want to consider and other learnings from within the industry as well. So, yep, that's it from me. I'm going to hand you off to Michelle Ruin from SSE, who's going to then talk to us about the data collection activities. Thank you very much.
This is the first year that we've been gathering these, so we're hoping to get we're hoping to get the report out Q1 next year. It's maybe important to recognise that 2020 wouldn't be a very true baseline of performance for the industry compared to other years due to COVID. We've got reduced working hours, reduced activities on site. The industry was locked down for a short period of time, especially with regards to construction. From a personal point of view, I think the performance has been quite positive. It's been quite good. However, it's important to recognise we have had some incidents this year. These incidents have been discussed within SafetyOn, and the details have helped us to inform the 2021 workstream, which we're hoping to kind of deliver and prevent these incidents from reoccurring.
Good morning, everybody. So for the next 10 minutes or so, I'm going to speak to you about the data we've been collecting as part of SafetyOn's work stream. So when SafetyOn was established, it was really important to us that we collected the data from across the industry so that we could trend the incidents and also target our focus in a way that we could look at the greatest risks and put some initiatives together around that. So SafetyOn member companies submit incident data and the numbers of hours worked on an agreed reporting template on a quarterly basis. So the template is based on experience and information gathered year after year to reflect the identified reporting and incident issues. So it's a kind of an evolving tool for us. We are working on it as we work through the year. If there's items we think can be changed, we are recording those and using them as we update the template. So SafetyOn members cover, in terms of gigawatts, the Tier 1 members cover approximately 10 gigawatts of the total installed UK onshore wind capacity, which is approximately 13 gigawatts. So we have quite a good coverage across the UK in Tier 1 members. So we are confident we're getting a good, broad overall view of what's going on across the industry in the UK. So just on this slide, it gives a very high-level overview of the health and safety incident data we've received from the Tier 1 members over the 5 quarters we've included, which is Q3 of 2019 up to Q3 of 2020. So you can see from the screen there that overall there's been 634 incidents recorded. Thankfully, we've not recorded any fatalities, which is obviously really positive. 25 lost work days, 7 restricted work days, 5 incidents that have resulted in medical treatment, 106 incidents which have been recorded as high potentials, 50 environmental incidents, and 4 incidents which have resulted in emergency response medical evacuation. Out of the 634 recorded injuries, 109 of these have caused direct injury to person. So just on the next slide, this is just an infographic emphasising the key points from the previous slide. We've obviously recorded no fatalities, so as I said, that's really, really positive. 2.2% of all of the incidents recorded resulted in emergency response medical evacuation. 16.7% of all incidents are high potential, and 17.9% of all the incidents recorded caused direct injury. So based on the data we've received through the analysis of that data with the work group, we have looked at the top 3 work processes where the incidents occurred. We take into account all of the incidents, and as you can see on that slide there, routine maintenance accounts for 153 incidents reported, followed by access and egress. I think it's important to point out here that in terms of access and egress for our data at SafetyOn, that accounts for access and egress in the entire wind farm as opposed to just the turbine itself. And then the third highest number of incidents came from working on electrical systems. So again, that was just at 45. So in terms of routine maintenance, we have identified through further analysis and deep diving that 29 of those incidents categorised in that category were actually involving dropped or falling objects. So based on the data and reviewing that and doing some trends, what did we decide to do on those 3 topics around routine maintenance, access and egress, and working on electrical systems? You can just move to the next slide there, Beata, thank you. So under routine maintenance, as I said, we were seeing an increase in the numbers of fallen and dropped objects. So in order to trend these types of incidents going forward, we have recently received approval from the TAC for addition of fallen objects and dropped objects in the SafetyOn data reporting template for 2021. So that's really positive move, and it also demonstrates that we are moving with the data we're receiving and the trends we're identifying and making the data collection template more user-friendly and more aligned to what the key risks are. So trends from this will support the work stream on working under suspended loads also. We've also looked at routine maintenance in general and identified that it's quite a broad category. So we are looking also to redefine the definition to limit it to turbine only. So it will give us a more targeted set of results and data going forward. Access and egress. So as I mentioned, SafetyOn takes into account the entire wind farm, not just the turbine itself. So trends under this work stream will support the SafetyOn work stream on traffic management. So the traffic management work stream is led by my counterpart under the data work stream. So Ian McCallum at RES is leading that work stream. So it's looking at traffic management on wind farms with an objective to prepare guidance that reflects good practice in the design, construction and maintenance of wind farm transport management, including delivery and loading and offloading of goods. So working on electrical systems is also in the top 3 work processes in relation to the incidents recorded. So it's another work process where we see incidents occurring quite frequently across the industry. So we published a report on the root causes of fires, as David mentioned, in turbines in October 2020. There's a new work stream established for 2021 for electrical safety and the hierarchy of control and competence. And the wind turbine safety rules are also an ongoing work stream under SafetyOn after transition from the Renewables UK to the Energy Institute in December of last year. Just the next slide there, thank you. So this chart gives an overview of the top 5 work processes where injury to body parts have occurred. So the top 5 work processes where direct injuries occur include routine maintenance, manual handling, working with power and hand tools, access and egress, and during surveys. So some of them will be expected. Manual handling, access and egress are traditionally quite high on the list when it comes to direct injuries across the industry. So we are doing further analysis on those incidents which cause direct injury to person, and some may have been a result of human error. Therefore, guidance produced under the Human Factors Work Group may assist in reducing these injuries and incidents. Thank you. So as well as an overview of the top 5 work processes, we thought it would be beneficial to note that the top 3 body parts which are most frequently injured are digits, your back, and also your hand, your whole hand as opposed to your fingers. So as you can see from the infographic there, fingers and thumbs, as I said, account for the body part most frequently injured. And the work processes where you're likely to injure your digits are included under routine maintenance, surveys, or manual handling. The majority of digit injuries result in first aid, which is good that it's not serious life-changing injuries that occur. Injuries to the back account for 6 lost work days, and manual handling is the main cause of back injuries. So again, that is as expected from looking at the data. Injury to hands are also frequent body parts injured and account for 6 lost work days. The main work processes where hand injuries can occur are access and egress, routine maintenance, manual handling, and lifting operations. So just to finalise, we've included a graph on this final slide, which provides us with an overview of the work processes where incidents occur that result in a consequence that affects our total recordable injury rate. So as you can see, manual handling accounts for the most overall and is joined with access and egress in terms of lost work days. So just before we round up on the data slides, as you can see, we are using the data we're collecting to target specific work streams and to improve the incident records and the safety statistics around those particular incidents and those risks. So as I said, we have gathered 5 quarters of data as it stands. The first annual report of the incident data will be reported in June, or released in June 2021. And if you need any further information or anything, just contact the SafetyOn email address on screen there. Also, you can obviously come back to us directly, or you're free to ask questions later on at the questions and answer section at the end. So with that, I'll just hand you back to David and move on to the next slot.
I think throughout what's been one of the strangest years that any of us will ever hopefully experience, it's been a great benefit to our organisation to be part of SafetyOn. I think the strength of the industry working together, proactively addressing issues and taking a strong leadership with so much uncertainty has been invaluable for us. It's given us the guidance to work with more certainty across all our sites, continue working safely, and actually deliver and continue to deliver critical services during a really difficult period. So that benefit and that bringing the industry together has been absolutely tremendous, and it's been a pleasure to be part of it. We share the same issues, we share the same sites, and by sharing, we really make a safer environment for everybody. We're all in this together, and all our interests are best served by being safe together.
My name's Ricky Guy. I just want to talk today about Tier 2 membership, what I think the benefits are, how we can move things forward. I suppose the most important part of today is to try and grow the members of Tier 2. Whilst we do have a fair few members, there's a number of names that I see that are missing from the list, which I would consider would be good contenders for joining at Tier 2 level. So you can just move on to the next slide, please, Bella. Yeah, as you can see, some of you may already know this, some of you might not. SafetyOn is divided into 2 tiers. So you have Tier 1, which is the large owners, operators, O&M service providers, etc., who have over 200 megawatts installed capacity, portfolio, etc. But the main focus, I suppose, where I fit in is the Tier 2. And I think it was last year, I asked a question in the stakeholder engagement, how many Tier 2 members were represented in the room, and it was very limited amount of people there. So we really need to grow the Tier 2, both the membership and the participation of Tier 2 members. If you can put on to the next slide, please. Yeah, you can see there, there is quite a few members of Tier 2, but there is, as I say, a lot of people, a lot of companies, that I consider would be missing from there. Tier 2 is all about engagement. You only get what you put in to the organisation, and as Tier 2 members, we want to get the most out of it. But it is a two-way street, and we need the expertise that's out in the field to feed back in to the group. So I would encourage you to have a look at Tier 2. Those of you who are in the audience who fit into that category, have a good look at the website, the categories, and some of the stuff we're doing. It really is beneficial. As Lindsay said at the start, SafetyOn was born out of probably an admittable lack of industry or lack of leadership, health and safety leadership within the industry. And following on from that, Tier 1 SafetyOn was formed, and following that, obviously Tier 2. And the benefit of Tier 2 is there's actually it's a lot smaller fees per year, which will probably please most people. But there's also an expectation that comes along with that fee. It's because it's so small, we expect feedback from the group and people to be engaged at the Tier 2 level. If you could put on the next slide there, please, Adam. So some of the benefits: if you're a Tier 2 member, you have access to SharePoint, which is available through Microsoft Office. It gives you the status of all the individual work streams. So there's a variety of work streams that are ongoing that Tier 2 members contribute to, and we actually need more of you to join in and commit some of your time to try and feed in. As I said before, Tier 2 guys we have the expertise to feed into the groups, and we know some of the pitfalls and probably been involved in some incidents over the course of our careers. So it's always good to feed back into the organisation and to improve things. It gives you stakeholder reviews on the SharePoint. You can have relevant events there. It gives you notice of those. There's logos for downloads and marketing material. There's also a feedback mechanism as well. It's very important. Lindsay also said at the start, this isn't a talking shop, so we need feedback from you guys. So in the chat box and Q&A session later on, we would encourage you to ask the questions and to challenge the SafetyOn organisation, so that we're looking at the right things and we can provide appropriate guidance for those topics. As I said at the start, Tier 2 is still underrepresented. So get in touch with myself or one of the other SafetyOn people if you think Tier 2 would be of benefit. I definitely think it's of benefit for us as farms. I mean, the access to the health and safety guidance documentation has been good. Fellow members, we can tap into knowledge, and it's also a good networking platform as well for some businesses who may be new to the industry. It also has the added benefit that the HSE are involved with the group, so that's also of benefit. I suppose that's, at the minute, the work streams that we're working on is traffic management, as Michelle spoke about. I won't labour the fact, but we are looking at a traffic management work stream at the minute, so I'm feeding into that myself, and from a tier 2 point of view, so we should get some good guidance developed from that. In the Q&A, guys, tier 2, we want to know what direction you think we should go in. What topics do you think we should look at? What are the risk areas for you and your organisation? So, as I said, I encourage you to feedback in the Q&A session later on or in the chat box, and I'm sure we'll capture the questions that you have. That's probably about all I have to say. If you move on to the next slide there, I think I'll hand you back over to David. And as I said, emphasise that if you are interested in joining Tier 2, my contact details are available from the group, so feel free to get in touch.
We're obviously in an evolving picture at the moment, and I think that will be essential for SafetyOn to continue the dialogue with the government, to feedback what's working well and what's also not working, so we can take that on board.
SafetyOn have provided good leadership for the industry, and I think it's key that momentum is maintained or improved, to provide that further leadership within the industry to ensure important project decisions, health and safety is its core and centre of that decision-making process and not an add-on.
So when we look ahead to 2021, we're certainly not going to be out of the woods yet when it comes to COVID-19, and we can't relax or afford any complacency when it comes to infection control and mitigation of any transmission of COVID-19. So that for me is going to be the priority to support the industry through SafetyOn and its guidance, even during those initial months that could stretch out longer. We just don't know yet. So having that front of mind for 2021, but also, as we did in 2020, continuing to plug away at those areas that we know need to be looked at.
Okay, so basically this part we're kind of looking at, what does 2021 hold? What kind of things are we going to look at? So the big thing for 2021 as well, one of the things that's maybe not on the slides are our first annual incident data report is going to be released hopefully by Q1 that highlights a lot of the numbers that Michelle was talking about earlier on. While we were still compiling this data, we obviously couldn't stop and wait to see what the data tells us to inform us on our next kind of direction. So we had to kind of use the group itself, talk amongst ourselves, find out the kind of concerns and the issues that were affecting us as businesses, and maybe look at working on them collaboratively to kind of improve safety on site. So, Beata, can you start with the thing? So one of the first ones we're going to look at for 2021 is traffic management at site. So this is separate from deliveries to site. It's not that kind of side of it. It's more looking at vehicle movement around sites and kind of addressing some of the things like the image you see on the screen there. That's one of our vehicles that was unfortunately to have a wee collision a few weeks ago. So it was born, as I said, it was born from member companies reporting incidents that involved collisions and other incidents, vehicles leaving the road, and these kind of things further on site. Falls from vehicles, offloading equipment, people kind of stepping back, kind of injuring themselves, that kind of side of it as well. Unstable loads arriving at sites, requiring kind of emergency kind of operations to get them stable again and offloaded. And overall vehicle movements on site. It was agreed that a work programme was needed to basically look at traffic management for onshore wind farm sites. Again, specifically around O&M. A lot, as we know, when a site's getting built in the UK, there's legislation in there that kind of forces the developer to develop a traffic management plan that advises on how the traffic risk will be managed on site. So what we're looking to do is develop traffic management guidance that will assist the industry, and will include obviously input from third parties. We want to also get out there and speak to the delivery companies, everything, and get their input. What's their concerns? What kind of causes these issues? Case studies from member organisations, kind of the things that have gone wrong on sites. Let's take a look at them. So we're gathering that data now from the members, both Tier 1 and Tier 2. The design of traffic routes on site as well, we're going to kind of look at that. What's good practice, the kind of easy ones that we all know about as we try and avoid kind of reversing on a site, we try and avoid kind of blind corners, these kind of things as well. And the planning and implementation of traffic management systems, speed limits, kind of road condition monitoring, all these kind of things as well. I mean, to put it into perspective, I was recently made aware of an issue that happened on one of the sites that's a member's involved in, when it was a Morrison's delivery vehicle accidentally took a wrong turn and ended up driving around the wind farm for a while, completely lost and needed assistance to get back down. So, it's this kind of issue that we're trying to deal with at the moment, and hopefully kind of we'll get kind of some guidance out in next year that will assist companies. Thanks, Beata. Can we progress? So the next one is work streams turbine decommissioning. So yeah, again, there's been a number of events that have happened within the industry that requires wind turbines to be made safe and decommissioned. Obviously, the most apparent one is the image you can see on your left there is when you get an uncontrolled event, something that's unplanned, and it leaves you with something that's potentially unsafe. Very public, very evident, draws attention, draws people to the area to see it, all these kind of things as well. This has happened to a couple of organisations, a couple of members within the team, and we're just basically trying to get in front of the problem, try and get learnings from these companies to the table, share them, hopefully get some planning together. So the way we're looking at it is work streams in two phases. What we call emergency decommissioning, which again is the image of the burning turbine there, when you've got that moment where we need to get this done as fast as we can. And again, the work stream for this one, it involves turbine suppliers, operators and Tier 2 members with direct experience in managing emergency decommissioning, and trying to get that kind of, what does good look like, what didn't work so well, so the next time it happens, we've got a bit more of a considered approach. The second one is also more along the lines of the image on the right-hand side, planned decommissioning. We do, in the UK, we do have aging fleet now. We have got, we're looking at repowering, we're looking at different options, and we are considering, we need to start considering how we're going to bring the turbines down safely, efficiently, and obviously taking into account environmentally friendly methods as well. Again, similar idea, a lot of the players within the group contributing to develop guidance, covering all aspects of decommissioning on the site. And as I said, kind of shows at the bottom there, the timelines, we're looking at emergency decommissioning guidance by the first quarter of 2021, and then more into the planned decommissioning by quarter Q3 2021. So hopefully we'll get that out next year. The next one is, as I mentioned at the beginning, we looked at the fires, or the fires in the wind turbines, and we also identified that there was a greater risk, really. One of the things the report kind of highlighted was, while fires did occur over, I think it was 48 fires occurred in a 5-year period, the number of technicians that were actually at risk was extremely low. However, when it comes to kind of arc incidents and kind of exposure to electrical conductor type incidents, there's a higher risk there. There's a greater risk towards our technicians on that one. So what we're looking at is to kind of address this kind of thing. So we did have a workshop with the HSE to clarify position on switch gears and transformers, and we are proposing that we we kind of go further into this topic. Maybe nothing's guaranteed yet, but we are looking along the lines of safe by design workshops, different technology, design phase kind of work, all that kind of thing. What does the next generation of switchgear look like for wind turbines? Outcomes for it is obviously, we're going to propose a work stream where we're looking at a hierarchy, where we're looking at position of the HV equipment within the turbines, controlling access to it, how do we control access to it, and obviously we need to touch on the training side of it, which might have a tie-in with the wind turbine safety rules, that kind of thing. We need to look at the competence of personnel who have access to HV equipment. And then obviously the other things is non-electrical work that's just taking place close to it. So that's the kind of rough areas that we're going to look at within that work stream. Okay. Okay, one of the ones I'm quite kind of keen on seeing as well is there's a confined space work stream that we're looking at. So several members, and it was good to see one non-member at the time who is planning to become a member next year, approached us raising concerns around some near misses on confined space turbine work. So particularly, so I think that the root cause behind this, or not the root cause, but the issue behind this is the whole industry uses the term restricted work area, which is absolutely fine. However, that's maybe led to, in some instances, a belief that there is no such, you can't get a confined space in a wind turbine, and that's not the case. There is specific risks you can bring into that kind of environment that would turn a turbine into a confined space. And what we're looking to do is just get an understanding of that, look at, this lack of awareness specifically by project teams. It's not really so much the safety teams. Safety teams tend to know this, but when you're looking at the technicians, when you speak to the project managers, we are getting things coming back saying it's all restricted work area, it's not confined space. And we disagreed with that. So again, as it says there, as mentioned earlier on, there was an identified uncertainty on the differences between restricted work area and confined space. And then the other one is concerns of the suitability of confined space entry training for the wind industry. There isn't a specific wind industry training program for that. It's more the standard confined space entry for mines or entering silos or anything like that. And we feel that it doesn't really fit our industry that well, and potentially we need to look and maybe work with the training providers on that one. So it was agreed that you put a work program together to examine the issues and hopefully develop some guidance, but that's due to kick off beginning of next year. I believe that's the, the last kind of, one of the last ones to look at as well is the working under suspended load. So this is the next phase of the 2020 work stream that we did. We got that research report out, or the Safe by Design workshop report. That workshop was mainly around the tower-to-tower aspect of working under suspended loads, as you see the bottom image there. What we're looking at now is what does the next phase look like? I personally view this as one of the kind of big successes that we did in 2020. It's an example of what SafetyOn kind of achieved. We managed to get the turbine suppliers and lifting operators into a room, got them to have kind of relevant discussions. It's worth noting that Siemens Gamesa very much led this and came to the table with some very good solutions that were kind of used by others to kind of help things progress. And now I think we are in a better place when it comes to carrying out complex lifting operations and protecting our workforce. So, kind of as it states, further work, we do need to look at other aspects of lifting operations. Going around the table at our meetings, questions are asked around clearer guidance. The workshop report is a good document, but it is very complicated. Can that be simplified down into a kind of user guide or a considerations guide? Again, looking at available technology and innovation, I sat very recently on an event with another company, a Tier 2 member, who brought a solution to the table that was used where, because of COVID, they couldn't get a lift done effectively, and because of other specialists being in other parts of the world away from the lifting location. And they actually used cameras, helmet-mounted cameras, to allow multiple parties tuning into a lift in real time. Fantastic use of innovation to get through both reducing the amount of people at the workplace and the COVID side of it. Was really, really good to see. And the third point is planning of lifts. We're getting, what does a good lift plan look like? That's the big question there. There's lots of different lifting plans out there, different kind of versions of them. We just want to know what's a good one, and hopefully get some kind of consistency across all of our members. Okay. When you go, Beata, thank you. This is the kind of last one I was kind of wanting to talk about was the, so this is an opportunity that we've got to collaborate with G+. So obviously, for the people that don't know, G+ is a kind of sister organisation where they deal with the offshore side of it. They've been on the go now for over 10 years, I think, something along that lines. We've got, so G+ mainly focus on the offshore side of it. However, their own data and stats kind of identified increased incidents on their onshore side. So obviously, building the offshore wind farm, you've still got to make landfall somewhere, connect to a substation, and there's more. There was an increase of incidents in that area, and this was picked up in their annual report. A lot of them were UK specific, and what we've viewed is this is a good opportunity to collaborate between both the groups. Maybe fair to say that SafetyOn's maybe get more of the expertise in that area to advise kind of through Tier 2, through a lot of our balance of plant civils contractors and these kind of organisations, what the issues are and how do we deal with them. Okay. And again, it's still early days. This will mainly be picked up at the beginning of next year, and we're still to kind of agree what the output of the work stream kind of looks like.
I think also there are a number of emerging issues, coming to the fore as well. And in particular, I would mention human factors. And we've noted that, when people are fatigued at work, they're more likely to make mistakes and have accidents. So it's pleasing to see that, human factors is included into the agenda for this Stakeholder Engagement Day.
Well, good morning, everybody. For those who don't know me, my name is Ewan McMillan, and I lead on safety and health for the renewables and retail businesses within Scottish Power. For the purposes of today, though, my role is really as lead for the human factors workstream. Now, it's a relatively youthful workstream, both in terms of age profile, but also in terms of just how long we've been going. And it's fair to say that my group have wrestled with the definition and scope of subject of human factors. But what we're all committed to, however, is delivering something meaningful to the front line, to the field workers. I think all too often we can sometimes create in health and safety processes and procedures that can be somewhat remote at times. So it's really important that we deliver something meaningful to the field, and that's our primary objective actually in 2020. Only a number of weeks to get that landed actually. And we're considering factors such as mental health and well-being, demographics, a bit on ergonomics, and also fatigue. However, today I'm really pleased to introduce an expert actually in the field to advance our thinking on the subject. And so I have great pleasure to introduce Dr. Fiona Errol. A little bit of background on Fiona before Fiona kicks off her slides. Fiona is the Director of the Centre for Human Factors, a Chartered Occupational Psychologist and a Senior Lecturer in Psychology at the University of Hull. She has over 20 years' experience in the field of work-related stress, working with organisations to understand unique sources of workplace stress and implement solutions to minimise the impact of these stressors. She has recently led on industry projects with Humberside Police, British Transport Police, Ørsted, Siemens Gamesa, and indeed the UK Health and Safety Executive. The focus of this work has been to inform and enhance practices in occupational stress risk assessment. The body of work has provided Fiona with relevant and valuable experience in effectively delivering applied research with multidisciplinary academic and industrial partners. So a nice blend of theory and practice, I would say. And we're very pleased to have Fiona join SafetyOn this morning and actually supporting the workstream going forward. Over to you, Fiona. Good morning.
Good morning, Ewan. Thank you ever so much for that great introduction. And before I start, I'd also just like to thank Lindsay and Beata and the SafetyOn team for extending a very warm and particularly welcome introduction to come and speak to you. As academics, the work that we do, in my view, doesn't really have any value unless we can apply it and make a difference to people's lives. And that's really the focus of the work that I've been doing over the last, well, many years. And I've worked across lots of different industries, but most recently, as Ewan said, I've done quite a lot of work in offshore wind, and I've come to have a great affection for the wind industry. And I think it's an area where psychology and human factors can offer a great deal. And I think David earlier said something about getting ahead of the problem, and that's very much what I would like to contribute to. I feel as though it's very, very difficult to be proactive in looking at health and safety. And if we apply what we know from academic theory and academic principles, and we use academic rigor to explore the challenges that industry are currently facing, then that's where the real value comes, and that's when we can get ahead of the problems and be proactive in dealing with health and safety. So it's a great opportunity for me to come and speak to you all. I'm very sad that I can't meet you in person, but hopefully there'll be opportunities going forward in the coming months where I can come and meet people face to face. A couple more things before I start, and I promise not to go on too long. As an academic, I often talk for 2 hours, so I shall try not to do that today. But I wanted to note the contribution of this work. My PhD student, Steffi McMaster, has just submitted her PhD that she's been working on in 3 years in fatigue in the wind industry. And so that's the topic I've chosen to come to talk to you about. Now, Steffi's very much an expert in this area now, having worked for 3 years specifically on this challenge. So hopefully I'll give you an overview of the work that Steffi's completed. But also, if anybody would like to speak to Steffi after this, I should have put her email on the end of the slides, but actually I forgot. So please contact me and I will put you in touch with Steffi, or of course contact me directly, and I'd be more than happy to chat with you. Before I begin with the talk, it's probably worthwhile saying that there will be an opportunity to ask questions at the end of my presentation. I won't be able to take part in the panel, but please do contact me afterwards if there's anything that you think of after the event that you'd like to discuss. Thank you. So Ewan at the beginning has just mentioned the challenge around defining human factors, and actually I didn't know Ewan was going to say that, and it's helpful segue into the first slide, because lots of people have heard of the term, lots of people haven't heard of the term, and even within psychology, not a lot's really understood about what human factors is. And I think firstly, that's because it's a really broad disciplinary field. We have engineers that are human factors specialists, we have computer scientists, and they all take a very different perspective and come from different academic disciplines, but they share this common goal of wanting to enhance the fit between human and their environment, whatever environment that might be, and whether that's at a very detailed level of how do we design a mouse, or whether it's at the cultural level, or whether it's at the organizational system level. We all work towards this goal of enhancing fit. And I think it's from that perspective that I've developed the interest in the work that I have. As a psychologist working in that field, what we bring to that work and to that broad goal is that we bring an understanding of human beings. We bring an understanding of the way that people work, the way that people interact, how social systems work, how sleep typically occurs, what impact it has on us, what challenging situations and how they impact on the way that people engage with those challenges. And we can bring our understanding of psychology to really help to address problems around this fit. Now, as I think Ewan briefly mentioned, I'm an occupational psychologist, and what that means is I have a focus on the workplace, and within that, my particular interest is really on understanding workplace risks. And this probably, that topic has probably dominated the last 20 years of my work. I want to work with organisations to understand their unique challenges. What risks do they have? What does a risk look like in this particular organisation? And develop an understanding of that with the goal of enhancing positive work design. So it's a really proactive approach. The idea is to understand and enhance and offset any risks that are there and inherent. And all workplaces have inherent risks. I think onshore wind and offshore wind are particularly interesting. And one of the reasons that I feel so positively about working in the wind industry is it's my view from the work that I've been doing that wind technicians have a particularly broad range of risks. There's different risks in all sorts of industries, whether you're talking policing or banking or whatever it might be. But I think the breadth of challenges in offshore wind and onshore wind is really quite unique. And so this is an area that I've developed quite a big interest in recent years. Within that topic, there's an area of my own expertise. My own PhD was in the subject of fatigue, so it's an area, again, I feel very strongly about. And I started this work over 20 years ago, and sadly, I've still got more questions than answers, and I've shifted my approach a little bit. I began with trying to adopt an experimental approach to understanding how people break down in really very focused contexts. But actually, it became apparent that what's more interesting is what does fatigue do within an industrial context? What is it that causes fatigue? Where are fatigue risks? What does it look like in a given industry? And what are the consequences of fatigue? So it's this really sort of interesting midway between the cause and the risks, and the effect being the impact on the individual, their health, their safety, and their performance. And so that topic's particularly relevant, and I'm delighted to see that it's gaining traction in onshore and offshore wind as an area worthy with focus and attention. So what I'm going to talk to you about is particularly a part of Steffi's research that was a study of fatigue in wind technicians. There was a small element of onshore wind, which I shall explain to you in a moment, and then there was a greater part of offshore wind. But the reason I wanted to talk to you about it today is I think it gives us a starting point for thinking about what could be useful activities to help develop understanding and policies and practices to minimise fatigue. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so as I said at the start, I started working in fatigue about 20 years ago. I didn't think it was going to be as difficult as it was. It's a really common experience. Everybody experiences fatigue. We experience fatigue if we sit at our desk too long. We experience fatigue if we deal with difficult emotional problems. We experience fatigue if we have physical demands. But actually, even from an academic perspective, after 100 years of research, there's still a lot that we don't fully understand. What we do know is really incredibly helpful, and we've got a really good basis of understanding that we can apply that has value. Firstly, what's really central to this is this feeling of subjective tiredness, and that's really the warning sign that something that a person is in need of some sort of rest or a break. What's less common and what's less well understood is this underpinning subconscious shift towards low effort processing that occurs alongside the subjective tiredness. So we're unaware typically, but when we're tired, we start to move towards strategies of behaviour and performance and interaction that really reduce our effort. It's sort of a backing off experience where we are less willing to invest effort. And of course, there's all sorts of things which influence the extent to which people will keep on going. And in the real world scenarios and also in all sorts of academic and experimental contexts, there are a huge range of examples of where people can keep on going and keep maintaining performance under extraordinary conditions, but this comes with costs. And I think understanding the effect of this low effort processing and understanding what those hidden costs might be are really important. And it's not impossible. I think that there's ways we can do this. The sorts of impact of this low effort shift is and the ways that we're known to change in our behaviour when we're carrying out work is just to the right of the slide, these three examples of strategy shifts and shifting standards and changes in our approach to primary and secondary tasks. And I'll just explain a little bit about what I mean by that. So a strategy shift might be a tendency towards speed over accuracy, and that trade-off that we constantly operate within a speed over accuracy, and we might subconsciously shift towards speed. We might have shifting standards where our view of what is adequate or optimal performance might adjust, and also we're less inclined to pay attention to those secondary tasks, those things on the periphery of the work that may be incredibly important from a monitoring perspective and an engagement perspective, but they're not the core of what we're currently doing. And these known shifts and these changes in behaviour are really the mechanisms that underlie this relationship between fatigue and accidents and incidents and near misses. It's these shifts in behaviour which explain why accidents happen when people are tired. If people are willing to keep on investing effort because the goals that they have are incredibly important to them, there are costs. And as we know, when we've all worked extremely hard, we know that those costs manifest in longer term fatigue and burnout and mental health challenges. And I'll come back to that a little bit at the end. Thank you. So we know a little bit, well, we know a lot from an academic perspective, and also there's a great deal of support from right across different industries in guidance of how to address fatigue risk management and how do we put those systems in place. And it's great that over the last 20 years, there's been huge amounts of work in this, and now there's some really well-established fatigue risk management systems. They're based on really sound scientific methods and understanding, and particularly they're based on our understanding of sleep and what sleep disruption does to a person and how to minimise that sleep disruption. So these well-recognised and well-established fatigue risk management systems tend to be very effective in controlling working hours to make sure that people's shift patterns are optimal given the context. Now, the dominant models of these fatigue risk management systems are from aviation, and it's my view that as a consequence of this, and that's where this work really started in terms of developing risk management systems, that the emphasis of all of this work is on sleep. And there's a huge emphasis on shift design and minimising impact on sleep patterns. And that's incredibly important. And I'd be the first person to say how important it is to get this as well, as optimised as possible. However, they don't typically address the full breadth and multiple sources of fatigue. As I said a few moments ago, we get tired when we sit at our computer for too many hours. We get tired if we have a challenging family dilemma or an emotional conflict. We get tired if we exert ourselves physically. So there's all sorts of sources of fatigue, and this is very, very true in a work context. And actually, the current approach to fatigue risk management systems tends to only address or predominantly address sleep and shift-related challenges. And it's my view that the way to take this forward as an industry is to start thinking more broadly about the nature of these multiple sources of fatigue. So just to summarise, we've got fatigue. We've got the fact that it's characterised by a state of tiredness, this subjective feeling of being tired, and that can be different for different people and different in different contexts, but that it's also associated with this aversion to further effort. And the causes of this are multiple. There's the psychosocial risks, those workplace characteristics like too much time pressure, mental demands, a low level of control. All these things are known to either cause or impact on the fatigue that's experienced. Physical demands, emotional demands, and sleep demands. And fatigue leads to risks to health and safety and performance and well-being. And the work that I'd like to do is really understanding what these blue boxes look like for onshore wind. What are the psychosocial risks? What does physical demand mean to people working in this high-risk context and in these safety-critical roles? And what are the implications? What are the performance outcomes? What are the safety outcomes? And also, really, really importantly, what are the implications to health and well-being? And I think there's often a separation between health and safety, and really thinking about these as part of a whole and part of a process in which they're complexly interrelated is really, really important. So I think what the goal would be is to start to build an understanding of what these boxes are in onshore wind. So I just very briefly wanted to give you an overview of work that myself and Steffi have been carrying out, particularly on fatigue across the wind industry, focusing on technicians. And I know there's much broader roles, but of course we have to start somewhere, and that was where we started, partially because of industrial interest, and partially because it felt like a sensible place to start given the breadth of the fatigue-related risks. And Steffi's PhD was the causes and consequences of fatigue in wind technicians. And really it was a two-phase study that started with interviews, a very small sample of onshore technicians, and a larger sample of CTV and SOV-based offshore technicians. And then the second part was purely an offshore wind quantitative diary study, where we looked at causes and consequences and patterns of fatigue occurring and recovery across two shifts. And the reason it focused on offshore wind rather than both onshore and offshore was we lost the opportunity to gain the data with the companies to which we had access. But it became more focused on offshore wind as we went along. The methods are really relevant, I think, for onshore wind, and there's all sorts of learning. But as you'll see from the next slide, that even in our preliminary interviews, it became apparent that there were great differences actually between the challenges facing these two different, very closely related but distinct and unique industries. The goals of the research were to first of all explore technicians' perceptions. As a psychologist, the first thing I always want to do is talk to people and understand what it means to them. What do you consider to be fatiguing? What do you think fatigue is? And what happens to you when you're tired? And then to really explore using quantitative methods, an understanding of what this looks like in a dynamic real world context. So in a morning, in an evening, for several weeks, over the course of different types of shifts, how do those aspects of fatigue develop? How does the multidimensional fatigue, what does that look like in this context? And we came up with a really rich picture. There were 4 pillars of risk that we identified, the 4 really strong themes. Interestingly, and I can't really say too much about it now or else I really will run out of time, but they were very much compounded by culture. So the cultural context, in particular, the attitudes towards fatigue and mental health and weakness, what really did influence the extent to which there were negative outputs. So we have found physical demands, emotional demands, mental demands, and sleep-related disruptions, and that these were really different in onshore and offshore wind. Of course, the wind industry is really dominated by climbing as a physical challenge, but this is quite different in onshore wind and offshore wind from my limited knowledge. And in fact, in this really preliminary work, and I can stress it was just a starting point, it became clear that the onshore technicians had a great deal more demand physically as a general rule. But as I say, it's initial work. There's the marine transit in offshore wind, which I have a particular interest in. But of course, then in onshore wind, there's the travel associated to these really remote areas. And actually, that remoteness has an impact on the sense of isolation and an impact on team dynamics and these emotional challenges related to management support and a wider team support. I won't go into all of this in detail, but if anyone would like to talk more or chat with us at some point, please do give us a shout. The quantitative study, probably the key point that is useful to make is that the patterns of fatigue over the shifts were cumulative. So fatigue did build up over time within a shift pattern. So for those people working for 2 weeks, the relationship between demands and fatigue became stronger as these weeks progressed. So there's been a lot of information. Apologies that I've thrown a lot out there, but it's quite a complex subject, and I wanted to give you a sense of the nature of the work and more interestingly, the perspective from which we want to address this. So just a few key points to summarise. It's incredibly complex. Psychologists have been working on this for over 100 years, and we still don't fully understand it. But we do know it's multidimensional, and we do know that there are causes beyond just shifts, and that industrial attempts to manage fatigue tend to focus on sleep and shifts and managing shift patterns. And of course, this is incredibly important, but it's not the only part of the story. So really, to understand what fatigue is from an industry perspective, it's useful to think about the multidimensional nature of the risks, the areas where fatigue has heightened implications for safety, and really probably the key message is that onshore wind has unique challenges. We can't just assume that what's true for offshore wind is true for onshore wind, and understanding where those risks are and understanding what they look like and what the implications are for your people, then that's really the key to progressing, I think, and really managing this challenge. In terms of next steps, I'm very keen to work with SafetyOn on their human factors work stream. I'd be delighted to engage with that. And really, we need to, the work that we carried out as part of Steffi's PhD was really preliminary research, and we need to do more work to understand what those risks are. And it'd be incredibly useful as a longer term goal to develop a multi-dimensional risk assessment that's designed specifically for onshore wind. Thank you very much.
Fiona, thank you. Thank you very, very much. Just before you leave us, unfortunately, you do have to leave us today, which is a pity, but, you know, I would say to everybody out there, if there are questions, please just bring them in. We'll capture the questions and make sure we feed them into Fiona. But there's three points really that I picked up on. Really, it was the cultural context and attitudes. That struck me strongly. I think any of us have done practical operational work or indeed health and safety work in the field know that is so important to how things go. The team dynamics and indeed the remoteness was the other point that I really picked up there. And a lot of your work's been in offshore, but equally onshore we have an awful lot of remote locations, and I think that definitely drives behaviour. All organisations, I think, are looking at fatigue in one way or another in 2021 because, well, A, it's the right thing to do, but B, we know that the regulator, Trevor, and his team have shown it's a key interest for the Health and Safety Executive. Just a very simple question from me, actually. Any thoughts on this wearable technology for capturing data? Is that part of it? It's only a small part, but it's part of it, I guess.
It is. I think that's a fair description. It's a useful and small part. I think there's some tools out there that I'm not sure I would be 100% sure they're valid and reliable. So the key, if you're looking at one of these techniques, the key would be to really review what evidence there is that it's valid, that it's actually measuring what it says it's supposed to measure. And by that, I mean, showing that there's a physiological activation, for instance, it might very reliably measure that change, but that might not relate to the fatigue of that individual. And I think if I was reviewing the value of those, I'd want to know that there was evidence to support their validity.
Okay, that's useful, because I think it can be seen as a wee bit of a panacea, silver bullet, that you just get the wearable technology, you look at the data, and that solves the problem. But I think it's a piece in the jigsaw, but it's potentially quite a small piece, actually.
And the interesting thing about it is that it's measurable, so it becomes very attractive because we like things that we can measure, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it's a valid measurement.
Okay, thank you, Fiona. I am sure there will be many questions coming through, and when you've got a bit more time, we will get these to you and get the answers back into those who are asking the questions. Thank you again for your presentation. It promoted and provoked a lot of thinking. And I think at this stage we're handing it back to our Q&A. So thanks, Fiona, and have a good day.
Thank you very much.
Okay, good morning, everybody. Welcome to the next session, which is the panel Q&A. I'm Keith Wallace. I'm the Service Director for Vestas in UK and Ireland, and I'm also the Vice Chair of SafetyOn. So, hopefully this morning's presentations, you'll have heard a lot about what we've been doing in SafetyOn in the last year, and likely have some questions. So this is really the chance for you to be able to find out a little bit more detail and maybe a little bit more depth of understanding on maybe some very specific topics. And also I'd say your input is really important to us, because I think the feedback from last year's event was that we got some very useful guidance coming from questions and discussions from the audience. And obviously this year we're going to have to try even harder to do it with not being able to meet in person, but certainly find different ways by which we get that. But certainly the feedback was really important, and I know often through this year people have referred back to points being raised at last year's event. So I think it certainly helped us through the last 12 months in being able to steer and direct some of the work programs and some of the feeling that was coming from people from that particular event. So it is a really important event, and I think certainly the Q&A section to it is an important one for us to be able to do that. So on the panel, so I think you've seen the list of people on the panel. So if we go on to the next slide there. On the panel today we've got Hugh McNeil. I'll maybe just go through it again. Hugh McNeil, who's Chief Executive for Renewables UK and also sits on the leadership board of SafetyOn. We've got Trevor Johnson, who's the Principal Inspector at the HSE. Gordon McDougall, who's the Managing Director of BayWa and also a Tier 2 member of SafetyOn. And Ian McCallum, who's the Head of HSQE at RES in UK and Ireland and sits on the TAC Committee. And I think what we're going to do is also maybe bring in a couple of the other people who have been speaking today, us, and when we go along on some of the questions to be able to pick on some particular points. We've got a number of questions that were asked in advance, and what we'll do is we'll go through those and answer those. And then we've got questions that have been coming in on the fly here. So as we've been going along, I think what's been really good is seeing the presentations that we've had so far have certainly prompted a few questions. So, this is the bit that maybe we'll be jump around a little bit. So please bear with us as we'll jump around and multitask a little bit as we collate together the questions that we've got together with the advanced questions, and hopefully we'll do the best we can to answer those questions as we go along. And hopefully we've got 3/4 of an hour for this session. And so yeah, and we've got plenty of material to go out here of what we've got already. So yeah, so that's my intro. So I think the best thing to do is we'll get straight into it, and like I say, we'll be flying by the seat of the pants a little bit, but I think that's nothing wrong with that. Okay, so I'll start off. The first question we've got is really about what would you say was the biggest learnings you take away from 2020, and how do you think this may be impacting health and safety across the industry? And I'll sort of give you my thoughts on that first, and then I'll ask the other guys on the panel to chip in on that. For me, one of the biggest learnings for me and investors has certainly been about learning to be resilient. And I think we've I think which is really important. We've had multiple headwinds come at us in 2020 so far. I think as now onshore wind is such a significant part of onshore power generation, we have to, we are big time, and therefore we have to be able to cope with it. And I think we've certainly proved it this year with COVID, with the growth that we've had, a lot of new construction taking place, and certainly, we've seen really good signs of people stepping up in face of all these multiple headwinds, and certainly showing a lot of resilience. In terms of the safety impacts, one of the things we've seen is maybe some concerns around complacency, and we've certainly seen that, and maybe sometimes people using COVID as an excuse, where it's not an either-or situation, it's both, having to maintain general safety and as well as maintaining COVID guidance. It's not a either-or. And certainly we definitely saw some complacency, particularly with maybe not the same kind of level of auditing and on the ground line management taking place. So I think we've certainly seen actions taking place as we've gone along to be able to address that. But certainly seen a lot of creativity. I think the situation and the challenges this year, I think for me, have certainly shown people across the industry step up and maybe do some different things. And that is certainly a lesson to be learned for the future in terms of how we turn that around, how we use these challenges to learn from them and be more creative. So I think that's my sort of view on the situation, and maybe jump across to we've got Ian. Maybe Ian on next on the panel. We've got
Keith. Ian's not got his camera on right now.
Okay, no problem. So David was there. So maybe I know David. Why don't you jump in as an impromptu? So David was on the panel there.
Okay. Yeah, kind of from a 2020 point of view, I kind of agree with you with the, I think kind of it's worth kind of noting the solutions that a lot of kind of members and other organisations have came up with to overcome some of the kind of problems we've got now. And kind of, I mentioned earlier on about the kind of camera system, what we're doing today, virtual events, virtual ways of meeting with each other and all that kind of thing as well. I'd be very keen for kind of all the things that are working, all the good kind of examples of this to kind of remain once we're kind of past this. I mean, also it's maybe worth noting as well, there's a lot of thing in the press now about vaccines and potentially there's light at the end of the tunnel. But, within my organisation, we're recognising it is important that it's not finished yet. After the festive break, we've got we've still got concerns. We need to keep the standards going. We need to keep our performance where it is at the moment until we are vaccinated, until we are kind of getting back to normal kind of thing. But, thanks.
Yeah, thanks, David. Gordon, have you got any comments there, Gordon?
Yeah, no, thanks. I guess one thing that really struck me during 2020, and particularly when we're talking in a kind of a health and safety context is, you know, we always talk about health and safety and our obligation to work safely and to kind of work that way. But I think 2020 has been different, but unless we can demonstrate that, we're not actually entitled to work at all. And I think that's quite a good lesson that we take through, that, you know, at all times we shouldn't be working unless we can work safely. And 2020 has been that one strange year where, you know, everything was shut down until we could demonstrate we're working safely. So I think that's a good lesson. It's a good kind of standard for us to maintain in everything we do.
I'm here again, Keith.
Yeah, hi. Yeah. Could you chip in there, Ian? Have you got some comments?
Yeah, I think for me, one of the key things that's come out, particularly of COVID, is the importance of people's well-being and looking after people's well-being. I think it's been a very hard year for a lot of people who maybe having to work from home, looking after kids, maybe stuck in a flat, don't have a garden. And it's been, I think, understanding and compassionate towards these people in these situations. Also, people in the field who are working, families will be maybe worried about, are they going to be in a situation where they pick up the virus and so forth. So I think it's understanding all of these particular issues, and certainly for me, people's well-being and the importance of human contact when you don't have it is really important, and it's something that I think we should certainly not lose sight of as we come out of COVID.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks, Ian. And Hugh, have you got any?
Yeah, so I completely agree with everything that's been said. I have to say, sort of mental health issues have been on my mind an awful lot this year as I've thought about my small team here and just my legal obligations, but my moral obligations to them all, and how do we give people space, and how do we make sure they get out and see some sunshine if it's ever sunny again. And so those things are obviously true. I think there's a couple of other things I'd want to add, and I suppose I'm quite reflective now as I'm about to leave this role in a few months' time, and my time with the industry. It's about 12 years now. Many of you will have been around a bit longer than that, but the first thing I'd add is the work that was done in terms of the guidance, and I know we'll talk about that, I'm sure we'll talk about that a little bit later, is as good a bit of collaboration across our industry as I can remember. And, that was really, really pleasing to see, because SafetyOn was still quite young at the moment that this hit. So I'd want to stress that. Shows what can be achieved when we collaborate together. And I suppose that leads to the second point I'd want to make, which is that we're about to enter a really exciting time for onshore wind in terms of the market opportunities, I think. All right, we're going to have an auction next year. We're going to have competitive pressures that come from that. If you place that within the context of what's going on with renewables more generally, if you think about multi-technology energy parks, if you think about what's happening with offshore wind as well, we're moving from an industry where, when I was first involved in it, I hope you don't mind me putting it like this, we were sort of people who wore sandals, right? We weren't really taken very seriously. Now we're about to become incumbents. And so now it's not just going to be about our legal obligations or our moral obligations. We're going to be quite rightly in the firing line. We're going to be held up to the very, very highest standards all the time under even greater scrutiny. And that's right, and we should embrace that, but we need to be ready for it, given that there's going to be this competitive pressure. We're going to be such an important part of net zero. So in my mind, the thing I wanted to try and land in this little session this morning was that, we're not going to just be talking to ourselves. It's not just going to be ourselves who, others are going to be putting greater scrutiny on us, and we should embrace that. And SafetyOn is in a great position now to really grow. So that's my reflections. But I completely agree with everyone else. The mental health issues and how we look after our people and how we think about our people has been an important part of what's otherwise been an incredibly challenging and often tragic year.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks, Hugh. And I hope they were safety sandals you used to wear in those days. Okay, I'll move quickly on to the next. The next question was, what deliverable in SafetyOn's 2020 work programme has been most valuable to industry? Where could we have been more active, and what can we learn from 2021? And maybe I'll just ask Trevor if he could maybe give us some insights there from his perspective, sort of looking from the outside in on SafetyOn. That's okay.
Absolutely. Now, I hope you can hear me. I mean, I think
this year's been really interesting for the onshore wind industry. And in a way, I've been listening to today's event, and I'm actually more positive than I was before the event started, and there's good reason for that. Now, you can see a lot of work that's being done, but to me, the key came from Lindsay just before we broke for a break, when she sort of said that health and safety has to be core of all the decisions that we make in the industry. And to me, this is a really important step forward because it goes to show we now change that narrative from health and safety being a cost to health and safety being an investment. And it's about investing in our people. And by doing that, we become a more efficient industry. And it's really pleasing to hear that. And then you sort of build upon what Fiona said in her session about and the link between fatigue with health, with safety, with productivity, and with well-being. And again, it's really pleasing. We're starting to move the argument forward. And I think once we do that, and as we do that and further in the journey, then the industry will become more efficient and it will become more safer as people understand the benefits of treating health and safety properly.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Trevor. Yeah, that's really good feedback there. And maybe if I could ask Ian, if you could maybe comment on this particular question about the work programme.
Yeah, I think the fact that in year one we've had such an extensive programme was certainly up there for me. But I think that is of value is the emergency response work programme that's delivered the guidance that I think will help create a consistency across the industry. And when people go from site to site, they will basically be finding the same things, the same way to respond, and just brings that consistency. And I think it was a great collaboration to use words earlier on. That we definitely that is one area that I think is will add great value to the industry as we create a consistency across the industry.
Great, thanks, Ian. Yeah, and Gordon, has you got any comments there as well? You're on mute there, Gordon.
Apologies. So I was just going to say, if I'm looking back,
it's the phrase of the year. You're on mute.
Most people want me on mute. I was going to say, I think if I was looking back in 2020, I'd probably, hopefully not remember it too well, but I think when we do look back, we'll obviously remember it for everything that's been around the COVID, the shutdowns and lockdown. And I think certainly the big piece that will always stick in my mind for what SafetyOn really did deliver on was getting us all back to work safely, getting the industry to move together and do that. And I think that was a fantastic representation of what the industry can do. And I think in all levels that was a great piece of work and a great representation for the entire industry to come out of that. So I was very delighted to be a benefactor of that, a participant to it, and I think it was the right thing, and certainly for me the highlight for SafetyOn this year.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks, Gordon. Maybe just one comment for me. I think the getting going on the data collection for me, I think is really important for the future. For the long-term future. Because I think as individual companies, I think often our safety data is maybe not as always statistically relevant, but when we pull that all together, I think we then start to build a database and a sense of what really truly are the hazards. So I think I'm quite interested in that. I think that's been quite a good step for us this year. So just keep the pace going because we've got a lot of questions to go here. So this is related to Tier 2 membership, and I'll also maybe jump in on some of the questions that we've got in as we've been going. And there's a question really about how do you as a company benefit from being a Tier 2 member, and what benefits for other stakeholders down the supply chain. And maybe I'll ask Gordon that question first as a newer Tier 2 member, and then maybe I'll probably just flip across and I'll just read the question again that we've got online, but you can answer that question first, Gordon. I think that'll be really insightful for your views on Tier 2 membership.
Yeah, no, happy to. I mean, I think we were delighted to become a Tier 2 member. I think we're a company that's been growing quite rapidly over the last couple of years in the UK, and I guess I could answer what's the benefits in many different levels. The most cynical one, you could say, looking at the companies that are all members, we want to see our name there and be a member of that, but that would be entirely the wrong reasons for membership. I think we're a company that, in our ethos, everything we want to do is put people first. We're a people before profit company. Everything's around that. So we see it as not just a kind of a benefit of being a member, it's our duty to contribute to this. And it's a privilege to be a part of it in terms of bringing everything through for the industry. And I think it's the common theme we'll get a lot of this is that consistency for approach, consistency for the way the industry works. All the companies we are working with, we're all interacting. I think it's very important that we are consistent. We've got a very high standard, so we want to be part of that. We want to be seen to be part of it. We benefit from being part of it. And so I would see it as being our duty to be part of it, and my duty to make sure our company is contributing to it. And it's also a privilege to be part of it as well. So that gives us, I like the way you put it earlier, the moral obligation. It's our moral obligation to be part of this, to contribute to the industry as well, because it's a small industry. We are becoming more mainstream, but we've also got a duty to continue really good work we've done.
Yeah, Keith, I completely agree with that, from Gordon. Sorry to cut across you, but just to sort of just do a bit of interaction, because obviously the development of Tier 2 membership, when we originally set up SafetyOn, I was going to set up a separate working group to catch the tail of people who wouldn't be able to afford to be SafetyOn members. But because we've developed Tier 2, we're going to do something slightly different. So we're going to build that into our supply chain working group. And it sort of comes back to this same point. We're going to be under competitive pressure. We're going to have to work with our supply chains and listen to them, keep them safe, but also learn from them to keep us safe. And so what's wonderful to see as SafetyOn develops is, if you like, I've got to be careful how I put this, and I can be quite clumsy, as you all know, but it hasn't felt quite like the exclusive club that perhaps when it started G Plus felt. We've learned from our G Plus colleagues, and we've reached out into the wider supply chain and making sure that the core messages and the activities that we're engaged in are collaborative, including in days like today. And I think that is why Tier 2 membership is important. That's also, excuse me, don't mind the plug, why those of you that are members of RUK, I hope will also get involved in our supply chain working group to talk about health and safety issues too. And it does fit with, this reaction to the instinctive idea, which is wrong, that we're going to race to the bottom as we come under this competitive pressure. It's going to be the opposite. We're going to move towards standardization. We're going to drive innovation. We're going to make our people safer and healthier.
And just to pick up, I totally agree with what you're just saying there, Hugh, through that supply chain part. I think we're all, we can take the view many of us are competitors and what are we doing, but the one thing we don't do is compete in health and safety. Well, we are driving to take cost out, well, we are doing all of that. Health and safety isn't something I consider adding to my bottom line. There's only one bottom line in health and safety for me, and that's nobody gets hurt, everybody goes home safely. And in that, we're all in it together.
Thanks, Gordon. I'll maybe just add, while we're on the theme of Tier 2, I'll maybe ask David if you could just maybe some comments on this question that came in, which it would be good to extend the Tier 2 membership. What help or support do you think the current Tier 2 members need from SafetyOn to promote SafetyOn membership benefits, as peer-to-peer encouragement is usually an effective method?
So, so, I mean, this is a good, I think the best kind of drive we've got for people joining was very much organisations reaching out to their own supply chain members, Tier 1 members reaching out to their own supply chain, saying, have you heard about this and all that kind of thing there. Part of the work plan that we've maybe not spoke about for 2021 is there's this ongoing communications work programme that SafetyOn runs. We're looking at, for example, a brochure type newsletter coming out in the new year. Other kind of systems there where we've constantly got the touch points there. We also work with the kind of RUK as well as that kind of that point as well, kind of reaching out to the who we qualify as Tier 2 and beyond that as well. So yeah, there are, as I say, it's something that we continuously look at is how we do communicate kind of side of it, steer people towards the website. It's on the website how you would join, and again, yeah, as just kind of working with our own supply chains and kind of see it.
Could I just add something quickly, Keith? I think is benefit as a stakeholder as a Tier 1 organisation is the value that the Tier 2 organisations will bring to the work streams. So in traffic management, we'll get Ricky from Barrows, and we'll get Alan McCairn from One Stop Wind on that group, and I think that adds great value. So it's not just about tier 1 down to tier 2, it's about tier 2 up to tier 1 and the contribution that we all can make.
Yeah, thanks, Ian. That's really valuable, because I think there's a couple of questions that have come in related to the engagement of tier 2 members, and I don't know if either you guys on the TAC can maybe also add this. Are tier 2 members invited to these work streams, or is there a sign-up process? And then there's a second question that's come in. I would like to know what more we can do as tier 2 to collaborate and help the tier 1 businesses. At the moment, I don't feel we bring any benefit to tier 1 or support, but we have the ability to add a lot of this. And so I think, again, there's a common theme there around how do we then help this. I don't know if either Ian or David can maybe add a bit more about this, getting involved in work streams, which is part of the key for what we really wanted out of tier 2 as well.
I agree. I completely agree with the points that were made there. But with the question, working under suspended laws as an example, that workshop involved the entire industry, stakeholders from across that kind of activity, and we wouldn't have got the level of input if we didn't have, your lifting contractors. If it was essentially OEMs, clients, and service providers, it wouldn't have been as successful. It was getting that point of view from everyone else. From an engagement point of view, I'm completely honest, at the moment we are engaging with tier 2 people that we see as tier 2 organisations that we see as would be able to benefit from the work streams that we've got going on. Just try to think at the moment, Ian might be throwing you under the bus here at the moment, but traffic management, there is plans to kind of bring tier 2 into the traffic management work stream, isn't it? Yes, as I was saying, we've got Ricky from Farrens who sits on it, and from One Stop Wind we've got Alan McCairns. So they were, it was a combination of we reached out and they reached out, and it's good to have them on board, because I think they bring, it gives us a much more rounded view of what happens with traffic management, rather than just tier 1 dictating to tier 2, and vice versa. So I think it's going to be a great collaboration that will bring out, I think, the best in the industry, without over egging it. So I'm really looking forward to it. It means we'll get it right, because we've involved all the right people. That's the important thing for me.
Yeah, and I would just pick up one comment on that and probably reiterate the one you made. It's very important that the ethos continues to be, it's not an exclusive club. Everybody's involved. Everyone's got a role to play. Like any risk assessment we do internally, you always kind of get a risk to be managed by the person best placed to manage and understand that risk. And if that's the tier 2 members, that's the tier 2 members. So I think that ethos is very, very important.
Yeah, and I suppose, so there's a couple of things that are worth saying about that. So obviously G+ learned from its experience. I should have said that when I made my earlier comment, right? So one of the most impressive events I saw on the offshore side was at a G+ stakeholder event in Holland a few years ago. It was fantastic. So it's worth making that point. I would hope that as the work program for next year is made public to everyone, that basically what Ian just described is how we work. That people who think they can contribute to help us get these work streams over the line and make them better, put themselves forward from the tier 2 membership, and we embrace them. Which sounds, Ian, like it's happening on the traffic management side, and hopefully can happen across all of the work streams next year. But that seems ideal.
Absolutely, because we've now got a rounded. We've got RES, we've got Energy Institute, we have Vestas, we have banks, Farrens, and One Stop Wind, as well as support from a consultant at Mark McDonald. So it's very rounded, and I think it'll get that's the way to get the best results for the industry.
Brilliant.
Yeah, that's great, guys. Thanks. Yeah, I'd maybe just jump on to. I know we had a really good presentation there about the human factors, and maybe we had a question regarding that. And maybe I could have asked Trevor if he could give some comments to that. We had a question about how can human factors, including occupational stress, fatigue, emotional health, best be monitored, and how is it, or how can it be integrated into the SafetyOn data risk profile? I'm just wondering, be interested to get your view on that, Trevor, regarding human factors.
Well, the first point I would make is I think for us as a regulator, fatigue is going to be one of our priority topics going forward for many reasons. So it is important. And I do recognise that it is sort of a complex issue, as was discussed before. So I suppose as a starting point, our view is that organisations should have a sort of fatigue management sort of policy and procedures and the like. And me and my team will start to look at that. So I think that is an important part of it. I think the reference to recording things, I think this is important because what we found is that on some sites, people are working very long night shifts and continual night shifts, and that's no wonder the mistakes were being made. So it is important that you record when people are working and how people are working and how many hours people are working. But also there's sometimes additional risk factors will come into play. So for instance, if lifts are not working on turbines, then people will be climbing more. And that becomes another risk factor which needs to be taken into account. And again, I think it's actually relatively straightforward to record that so that you can start to build up the picture, which helps you to develop your risk management policy and procedures. So again, I just think it's really important, and recording is one of the keys to that.
Thanks. Yeah, that's great. Thanks, Trevor. Yeah, that's good insight for us. I'll jump on to some questions in relation to the emergency response guidance arrangements we've put out there recently, and maybe ask a couple of the guys to comment on that. And in addition to that, we've had some questions or some points raised around emergency response. People are particularly interested in that topic. So I just wondered, maybe Ian, have you got any sort of thoughts on your views on our emergency response guidance that was published?
Yeah, I think I mentioned earlier. I think it offers a consistent approach for the industry. I think it focuses the industry on that area, especially start to plan for it rather than when it happens. What do we do? The guidance here will support and help. But the important thing for me is that the fact that it starts on that journey for a consistent approach across the onshore wind industry.
Well, and plan and drill, right? I mean,
yeah, absolutely.
You do it all beforehand, so you know how it runs if you ever face that situation. And that if people just want to take one message away from it, that's the crucial thing.
And that's the time for it all to fall apart, not during an emergency. That's when you want it,
Yeah, and there was the comment was also related to the fact that it was jumping around here so I can find it. But yeah, that's really good. Yeah, that's what it was. Yeah, we constantly see wind farms next door to each other with different O&M contractors. Reluctance to call upon these companies to assist in rescue, and have agreement with various companies across the industry. I don't know, David, if you've got any or Gordon, sort of any views on that in this sort of cross collaboration across farms? If we've got maybe the point being there, if we've got a common standard related to emergency response, does that make it easier to be able to do that?
Absolutely, and I think I've been seeing that kind of prepare and drill, the kind of consistency. That's really what makes a huge difference. If in an emergency or an emergency situation, the last thing anyone wants to be doing is working out whose rules are they working under, whose procedure. The more they're the same, the more we can run straight into it. We are a small industry. There is a lot of collaboration. There's a lot of cross collaboration and contracting. We're probably one degree of separation around this industry between who's doing what, how we work with each other. I think that consistency around this area is absolutely key and is a huge benefit. And in many ways, it'd be daft not to have it, but it's really good that we have it and we're continuing to improve it.
Yeah. Thanks, guys. Maybe just like pick up on a questions related to mental health. I know we've talked about it a few times, and maybe just be interested to know when we met last year. I mean, we talked about mental health. Given the pressures of COVID, can the panel provide insight into how mental health has been managed over this year, and what lessons can we share? I'm just wondering if you and I know in Scottish Power you've done a lot of work on this. I'm just wondering if you would be able to share maybe a couple of comments there on that topic.
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, we got yeah.
Maybe even video too. It's a complicated subject, and I'm not meaning that just to be flippant about it. I mean, I guess since March, Scottish Power's experience, not just Scottish Power Renewables experience, has been keeping moving, I guess, being aware of what's happening in the wider UK and the various countries within the UK that we operate, and trying to give a bit more certainty to staff in many respects. That's one thing I would say. You can't give absolute certainty, but our communication, we're lucky to be a bit of the scale we've got. We're lucky to be able to do these weekly communications. So we built a microsite, and our occupational health team, again, lucky to have an head of occupational health, and although not permanent company doctors, we do have access to clinicians. So we're lucky in that respect. So I'm very conscious of speaking as a large corporate here. But there are small things that can be done by every organisation. So the other thing we did do quite early on before COVID was, several years ago now actually, set up the concept of mental health first aiders. Now I know that rather than a top-down or bottom-up approach, peer-to-peer works really well, as I saw in some of the comments earlier. And what we're finding is just quietly, the mental health first aiders have been quite a powerful resource, I would say, just dealing with issues and support. So that in many respects, the kind of very formal approach that sometimes companies have that can do, that doesn't work very well, looks very good and very, very finished, but maybe doesn't quite hit the mark. I would say the mental health first aid is a way to go for all organisations, and you scale it to the size of your organisation and scale it to the risks that you're bearing. So I guess there's a couple of points. I mean, regular communication, we've been doing that almost weekly actually, through our company chief executive, but then the business chief executive, so in SPR's case, Lindsay Mcquade, and also that's through our microsite, keeping abreast of the changes in the rules and guidance, which is no mean feat because we operate in every part of the United Kingdom, and also the bit I would advise or encourage everybody to do is think about mental health first aiders, because we're all very good at doing the first aid bit, but maybe a bit less good on having resource. And you might just find when you tap into your organisations, people are quite voluntary about that sort of thing. They actually put themselves forward. It's amazing actually. Well, I was amazed how proactive people have been about joining that squad, if you like. So there would be a couple of remarks that I would make.
Yeah. Keith, just on that, Keith, really quick for us. We've noticed that, it's keeping that communication with the staff really important, but it needs to be regular. And I appreciate that, staff, your employees, they change their minds. A lot of our staff said, oh, we're desperate to go into the office, when we get a chance, we're going to go into the office. And then we've done another follow-up with them, and it completely 180. It was a completely different message coming out from staff. Don't want to do it anymore. We also noticed an increase in concerns around mental health when the second spike happened and the second set of lockdowns happened as well. So it's just really important, maybe once a month maybe isn't enough. Maybe you are looking at very regular, because having the door open all the time doesn't work either. People are not inclined to approach you and say, I'm having problems here. Whereas if you give what we do, we use a pulse form, and if people fill that in, that gives us some really useful information to kind of base our approach for mental health within the business.
Yeah, thanks, David. And any others maybe want to comment on?
Yeah. I was going to just say, Keith, we've tried our best to do many of these initiatives as we can across our business, and I guess the one thing, just as David was touching on, you kind of got to draw people into it. And the one thing, sort of doing outreach things, it's hard to get that to the right recipient. And I think my concern would be, as a society as a whole, next year we actually begin to understand really what the implications of mental health have been. And I think we've done all the proactive things we can during this year. I think next year, as people start to maybe some of these things materialise, it's about how we react to that and how we support once people are coming back and how things move forward. So it's never a job done, and I think it's going to be an ongoing area for us. And I think how we maybe look after people as they return and maybe have difficulties is going to be key.
Yeah, thanks. I mean, Trevor, were you say something there, Trevor?
No, I think it was me.
Oh, yeah.
No, I was just saying, we certainly we ran a kind of wellbeing week the other week. And out of that, there's going to be some continuation of some of the more things more people are more interested in. We did some yoga classes, people from home. And one of the successful ones was having a coffee a kind of coffee break thing where we kind of randomly put people from all across the organisation together to have a conversation for half an hour on anything they wanted to. So it's a kind of breakout session and just encouraging people to talk to other people, and even think about the people you have your coffee machine chats with. Just continue to talk to them as well, not just say me as the boss or anything like that. So a whole bunch of things I think we're trying. Some work better than others, but certainly it's something I think we've got to continue doing, especially through winter and into January once we get beyond Christmas. So we're going to kind of continue with some of the successful things we did there in the longer term. So.
Keith, I agree with everything that everyone has said. I suppose I've got one thing that hasn't been said. I think the pulse survey thing is really important. We've just started to do that finally, should have done it ages ago, and that gives you anonymous data. People know it's safe, and goes through, even for us, it goes through an HR person's, and you can just get a sense of what's really going on. It enables people, draws people out. All of the other initiatives, we're trying to do similar things. The thing that struck me is I've had to think about where people live, right? It's all very well saying we can work at home if you've got a house and you've got a strong broadband connection. It's much harder if you are on your own, away from family, in a house share with 3 or 4 other people who you may not even know that well. You just moved into it. A couple of cases in our team just before this all began, and the experience will be very different. And I just think we have to be alive to being able to distinguish different types of our employees and the people we have responsibility for and the pressures that they may feel. It's all very well saying work at home. It's harder if you're in a flat with loads of people all over you.
Okay. It's a very good point here. I think one thing we did around that was we were semi-closing the offices and we were saying that, you can have very limited numbers in down to the 10 or 15% of usual capacity. The prioritisation around that was not actually on business needs, it was around mental health needs and providing a safe workspace for people to come in. And I think reprioritising that way was quite important for us.
Completely agree.
And Trevor, just wondering, Trevor, if you had any sort of views on it from a regulator perspective around mental health?
Yeah, not only from a regulatory perspective, but also from an individual perspective as well, because we've dealt with the same as yourself, working at home, and I listen to everything that's been said and agree. The one thing that we've done as a team is try to be flexible over our hours of work as well. And in particular, what we've tried to encourage is people to take long lunch, so that during the winter days they can go for a walk during the daylight hours. And that, today is really fabulous in the snow, but the reality is it's good to get outside, got some fresh air, and all of that. So we as a team have done things to look after our own well-being and mental health and the like. And it's pleasing to hear people sort of talk about people being individuals and needing to treat people as individuals and keeping in touch. Because as a regulator, that's what we would like people to do.
Thanks. Yeah, thanks, Trevor. Yeah, okay. Now we're just sort of drawing to the end of this session, and about what we'd like. I've got one question left, which I'd like all the members of the panel could maybe use as their sort of finishing up sort of question. Hopefully that will keep us bang on time. Yeah, it's really around the future, and I think it says, renewables, onshore wind will play a significant role in broader decarbonisation of industry. Development, construction, and operations will increase significantly in the next decade. What challenges should we be preparing for today, including ensuring the supply chain is sustained for the long term? And maybe Trevor, could you maybe give us your thoughts on that?
Absolutely. And again, it is pleasing that we're now talking about the industry expanding again, and that's really good news. But with that does come the consequence of where are we going to get the technicians from, where are we going to get the skilled people from, and the like. So going forward, I think one of the big challenges will be the recruitment of the right people into the industry, and that in a sense will also be based upon it being a safe industry, because people will want to come into a safe industry. But then when they come into the industry, make sure they are sort of given the right training, the right experiences to become competent to the work and to work safe and efficiently within the industry. And the other thing I would just add is the industry is now getting older, and I do have this sort of feeling that some health issues are going to creep along that we've not really noticed before. So maybe it'll be sort of musculoskeletal or something like that. I don't know, but I do think we need to be sort of vigilant towards health issues as well.
Yeah. Thanks, Trevor. Yeah, and Hugh, how much have you said?
So I sort of said this in my opening remarks, Keith. So apologies, but I guess I've got two things which sort of repeat, but I'd like to land with people. I think the first is we're going to be part of incumbency, right? On our data, there's 30 gigawatts of onshore. If you think about repowering as well, by the end of the decade, 35 by 35, we'll have a number like that. So we are going to be taking off again in one way or another. And that combination of competitive pressure, which I touched on earlier, means we're going to have to standardise more. But what gives me hope and what I'm really upbeat about, and hopefully that's come across, is the collaboration of organisations like this and the collaboration we've been talking about between Tier 1 and Tier 2 members, and hopefully my organisation as it goes forward. So I'm really excited about that. And the second point is that we're no longer going to be a single technology industry. I don't feel I represent single technology companies anymore. You're going to be doing multiple technologies at the same site. There are regulatory issues around that. There are going to be health and safety issues around that, around the development of energy parks or the equivalents of those. And we need to work through all of those together. But I'm incredibly upbeat and optimistic for the future of our industry. I think we're in a brilliant shape, and for this organisation too.
Thanks, Hugh. That's great. Gordon?
Yeah, kind of hold on that a little bit. I mean, for me, it's been a pleasure kind of coming through this industry as it's growing up, and as Hugh's pointing out, we're now very mainstream. And I think as we move into that mainstream, I think the big thing for me is not to forget that we did used to wear sandals, that we are an industry that prides ourselves in being moral and socially conscious, and that we continually sort of remember those firm roots, that they're really good sort of pillars for us as we go into the future. Not to forget them, continue to collaborate around things like this. And, you know, I think what SafetyOn's achieved is something for those who've really led it to be very proud of, and for the whole industry to be proud of. So I think we continue in that kind of collaborative way would be great.
Yeah, thanks. Ian?
Yeah, just really to echo what everybody else is saying, I think when we talk about sustainability, people tend to typically think about the environment, but when it comes to sustainability, the resource is human. And it's really, you know, looking ahead, we think about the design of you know, the infrastructures we have and the competence of people to ensure that, you know, they can be maintained, and actually we're actually improving the kind of workplace so that people can work safely. And as hybrid sites possibly come in, then we need, again, that competence area needs to come in. We might have people working on multiple sort of lost my focus. Multiple disciplines, you know, whether it be storage or turbine or solar. So again, that I think is just really where we need to keep an eye on things and keep focused.
Yeah, thanks, Ian. Ewan, do you want to add anything?
You're catching me off guard a bit here, Keith, every time with these.
Oh yeah, it was a wild ride we're coming on here, though.
Yeah, I quite enjoy the randomness of it all. I was going to say a wee bit provocative maybe, but I think we've got to sometimes turn. This is more of a general point. Sometimes we've got to watch that we really understand in your world, for example, in service and O&M. I think sometimes you've got to turn the organisation on its head. It'd be interesting. The real litmus test maybe in 2021 is. This is not answering the question, it's the point I wanted to make earlier. In 2021, the real litmus test is seeing what the technicians really feel it's like out there. You know, I would echo the point that Hugh made about where folks are living. I was going to extrapolate that a bit further to say, you know, I would challenge that on the call today, we're more or less all the same. Whereas if you turn it right round in itself, turn the pyramid over, there's the base of that pyramid's out there working today. We've got people right out, as we all do. And I think that's the voice of the customer for me. I would really like to hear a bit more from them in 2021 and 2022. I guess the other point though is the other bit that Ian made about the new technologies coming through and everything else. We're going to see a whole load of new skill sets required. So I'm not answering the question at all, I know, but I wanted to get the point across about flopping this pyramid over, because I think that's really, really important. You know, far too often health and safety can be this rather siloed, and we think we're doing all the right things and sometimes completely missing the dartboard. So there's my wee provocative challenge for 2021, is to turn it right round and get some feedback from those that are the customers at the end of the day.
Oh, excellent. Oh, thanks, Ewan. No, really good. I guess that's the point of this session, to try and get to dig in a little bit deeper into stuff. So, yeah, David, do you want to add some comments there, David? Yeah.
It's a simple one for me, and it goes back to COVID, and it's the immediate thing that I'm concerned about is, we're looking at projections, we'll be vaccinated by Q2, and certain parties believe this. There's going to be a rush to accelerate projects to recover lost ground, and most of the safety professionals on the call and in the groups and all that know that if you don't manage these kind of activities well, you start to get an increase in incidents and people, ill health, because changes are made, things are pushed faster than what they should be. So it's just urge people just to take that second, and maybe even using some of the lessons we've learned off of this session today. Think of the human factors of the people that we're asking to do the job. Is it feasible? Are we being realistic? And just take the time to plan the works properly.
Thanks. Yeah, great. Thanks, David. Yeah, and just finally for me, I think for me it's, the world's in the future is not going to get less complex. That's one thing for sure. But all of the things we've been talking about, it's going to get more complex. And I think from a safety perspective, it's all about leadership and collaboration, which is what this organisation is about. That's how you deal with complexity, is leadership and collaboration, and moving the agenda along from being purely about maybe bureaucracy and documentation, and moving it onto those sort of things. And that's certainly where I see things.
Keith, could I make just one final remark? Is there just a few seconds for that?
No, but go on.
Right, just literally a few seconds. It's just the point about...
There's a hook being pulled at me at the moment.
Right,
so
just the point about cost and investment. And, Trevor did make that point, and I think that's the takeaway again. It's the investment, not the cost. And that's such a powerful remark. So I'll just leave it at that.
Brilliant. Thanks. Great. That's it. So thanks, everybody. Thanks for all the contribution. Thanks for all the questions. I know there's some questions that we didn't get around to answering, and we've made a commitment. We'll follow up on those afterwards. But yeah, really appreciate the contribution of everybody and all the questions that we had from the floor as well, which is really, really good. So as I'm over time, I'll dive off and hand back to Lindsay. So there you go.
That was a really great session, and I'm delighted that we've been able to have such a dynamic conversation, albeit in this virtual world. And I thank all of the speakers and the panelists for their contributions and the updates that they've been able to provide us. I understand that the slides will be made available if anybody would care to see them. And if there is a Q&A follow-up to pursue, we'll get that out, and it might be that we answer those questions through a series of posts or information on the website. We'll look into how best we can communicate back to you all. I think Trevor touched on the letter that was sent to the wind industry over the summer period, and that was a bit of a jolt, I would say, and sitting and looking at the work that SafetyOn has been doing throughout that period, it really did prompt me to self-reflect a bit about, have we been complacent? Where have we dropped the ball? Is there something we're not moving sufficiently fast on? Are there areas of work that we're neglecting to follow through? And all of this with COVID rumbling on in the background, as you're all aware. And I think that it was good, again, just to have that refocus. And, there's one thing that I reflect on very often with my team, and keeping in mind the fact that we have got everybody in the sector has got these growth plans. The government have been very clear on the trajectory that they want to follow as well. This is as quiet as we're going to get. So things are going to become more busy, and projects are going to be coming through, and investment in every sense of the word is going to have to come to the fore. So I think for me, we need to take stock and ensure that health and safety remains at the core of every decision that we're taking, and that we are mindful of the obligations and responsibilities that we have to our teams, to our employees, to our colleagues, to the industry in general, to the communities that cohabit with our projects as well, and that everybody is staying safe. I think the updates that we've given you around the work on COVID-19 and the 2020 work plan, I hope that's landed well with you and you understand what's been going on. And if you haven't yet looked at the published documents, they're all available on the website as well. And if you have got any questions, I know that the authors of those reports and the working group members of those reports would be more than happy to speak with you as well. And it is all about sharing that data, knowledge and messaging and analysis that's happened today. Looking ahead to 2021, again, we're not letting up. There's a lot of new topic, a new agenda coming in there, which will be great to see. I am particularly looking forward to seeing the first report in June around the data collation that we've done and what does that actually mean for us and where we're going to go. And I think, having the people aspect being talked about to such an extent today has been helpful. Mental health was talked about at length last year. It's been a flavour throughout and peppered throughout today's session as well, talking about human factors as well. It really lands with me that we are very mindful as an industry of others around us. We are all living in this virtual world. We've all experienced those days where you're literally back to back on Teams meetings or got Zoom calls and you barely have time to catch your breath, but occasionally you just have to say stop and take some time and make sure that your teams are doing likewise too. It is not going to be a flick of the switch with the vaccine coming in. We are going to have to transition out of that, and that is going to bring various concerns, risks, worries across all the populations that we've talked about. And what we can't do is have any of that stress or concern or worry overshadow some of the other health and safety issues that we also have to manage. So I think we're going to have to pay very close attention as an industry to the risk factors that we're all going to have to manage over the next 6 to 12 months as we come out of COVID-19. So I think Hugh's point about incumbency is utterly relevant as well with the goals around net zero, the green industrial revolution and the green recovery and all the wonderful opportunity that holds. There does come responsibility, and all eyes are going to be on the onshore wind sector because we are going to be the ones that are delivering in short order. There are offshore projects constructing right now, but even with allocation round 4, the next CFD auction coming through at the end of 2021, the projects that are going to deliver in the next 4 years out to 2025 are more than likely going to be the onshore projects. Activities are going to be very much focused on in our patch, if you like. And whilst there are offshore projects continuing in their construction activity, we probably already know where they are. The number of projects that we need to manage and the thousands of turbines that are already in the operating fleet in the UK and then will be joining as we go through this further investment is something that we as a group, as SafetyOn, need to get our head around and make sure that we are covering all bases and supporting the industry and that growth plan from a health and safety perspective as well. I think a couple of other points that I'm reflecting on is about the sort of inclusive nature of our organisation. I've been really pleased that sense of openness and transparency and engagement has obviously resonated with certainly the speakers at the very least today, and I hope more of you as well. It was important that this wasn't set up as an exclusive developer-led club. It was important that we engaged into the supply chain at the deepest level so that we were getting that reverse pyramid that Ewan talked about, and there's certainly a lot more that can be done there. I think that a lot of those risks are best managed by those that are closest to them and understand them, and we need to work effectively across the piece to make sure that we are identifying and implementing appropriate mitigation where we possibly can. And if there is consistency in approach that can be going through that, shared experience that can be going through that, and ultimately any incidents avoided as a result, that will be viewed as a win in my books, and I look forward to seeing that as well. I guess just in closing, there's a couple of other thanks that I would like to mention. One to the Energy Institute and BIAPA in particular for the coordination and navigation of today's event. I appreciate that we're all used to a multitude of different platforms and a multitude of different formats, so everyone appears to be different, but that's how we're learning to be as agile and flexible. Thank you to all the speakers and panellists for making time to join today, in particular Trevor and Fiona. Really appreciate you coming in to share your views and give your feedback and also to give your insight. And I very much look forward to seeing more of Fiona's analysis as we work over the next 12 months. And then finally, a special thank you to Hugh. This is probably going to be his last stakeholder event, given his intention to step down from his role as Chief Executive of Renewables UK. Personal thank you from me, and I'm sure the rest of SafetyOn will join, for his contribution and his participation and his enablement of engagement with the wider onshore sector as well. So a big thank you to me from me on that one as well. With that, I wish you all well. We're not going to have the same travel issues that you would have faced when you were leaving the SafetyOn event last year, least of all because a lot of us would have been heading off to the Green Energy Awards. Yeah, I think I appreciate the fact that everybody's here, supportive of SafetyOn. We certainly have by no means got this nailed. There's certainly a lot more to do. We have our work cut out for us, given the amount of growth that we have planned as a sector and as an industry. But what I gather from today is that we've absolutely got the buy-in, the collaboration, the coordination, and the willingness for us all to come together and make sure that health and safety remains a key focus and a number one priority for us all. So thank you very much for your time today. Look forward to seeing you in person at some point very soon. And thanks very much again. Cheers. Bye-bye.